welcome back to the Culture Books Club, where we're finally getting into the first chapter of Consider Phlebas. My name's John, and as will be our wont, I'm joined by Sheridan.
Hi. Okay,
Sheridan, why don't you tell us what happens in Chapter 1?
Well, Chapter 1's called Sorpen, and there's a dude, or a changer. I'm a little confused about whether he's man. He's in something called a sewer cell.
Yeah.
Which sounds awful, and I've never quite heard of anything like this.
No, it's a beautiful piece of imagination and writing, the way he introduces the concept of the sewer cell in a way that you know exactly what it is without ever having heard of one before.
It's basically drowning in someone else's crap.
Lots of other people's crap.
And he is stuck in the sewer cell, about to have the literal and proverbial shit come over his nose and drown. Yep. And then we have a flashback where we're introduced to a number of characters, which seem to indicate all three of them, but at least two of them are going to be highly significant.
Yeah. Could well be. So, okay, we've got the sewer cell, and he's in a trance state. What do you think the trance state's about?
Well, it seems to indicate that the trance state is something he needs to enter in order to change his physical appearance, because he's trying to make his wrists smaller so he can escape his shackles. But he seems unsuccessful at that.
Well, he just doesn't have enough time.
I mean, there is definitely already some linking to the prelude.
Yeah.
In that, if I'm not mistaken, he's not given a name.
Yes. Wait till we get to the end of the book. That's actually, I hadn't quite twigged the significance of that, but it is going to be quite a big deal. Yep.
So he doesn't have a name. And also, when Balveda enters, who seems like she's a very powerful person, or at least her knife missile, is that what they call it?
Yes. Now, I just want to note, this is the very first time the word knife missile has ever been used in the English language. And
isn't it two words?
Okay, but as a phrase. And today, Raytheon market their knife missiles.
Wow, okay. What's Raytheon? Some sort of weapons?
Defense weapons company. They make a version of the Hellfire missile that doesn't explode. It just slices things open when it hits them.
I wonder how you feel as an author when that happens.
Thankfully, Mr. Banks didn't live long enough to see that. But I think he'd have been disgusted and flattered at the same time.
But there's a point where, by the sort of halfway or 2/3 through the chapter, Balveda, says a few things to our main unnamed character, and it appears to stop him from having any hope, and he's unable to make his wrists smaller and slip out. Because it says, but something about the solemn final way Balveda had spoken his name had crushed him inside, and he knew then, if not before, there was no escape.
Now, this chapter is set in something that's called a gerontocracy. And again, that wasn't a phrase that was that familiar to anyone back in this book was published in 1987. Whereas now we look at the modern US where everyone with any power is over 80 years of age, and that phrase is actually getting used a lot. Gerontocracy, as in a place that's just ruled by really old people.
But, I mean, look, this is one thing that I was a little confused about, is it seems as though there's the introduction of an all-powerful entity or race, or one doesn't know what it is, called the culture. Yes,
which we have named this podcast after, which is a bit of a clue.
True.
Yeah.
Of which Balveda seems to be strongly associated with, and she doesn't seem to be very old.
Yes. Well, hang on. So the gerontocracy is a client state of the cultures, and it literally here calls Peristek Balveda agent of the culture. So that's her role. She is their representative.
She seems young. There is a lot of references, to her appearance. It's almost like, oh God, is this going to be some sort of gendered misogynist text? Because she's got slender hands and she seems attractive. Yes. And appealing to everybody. So she doesn't seem old.
Yes, but there's the gerontocrat, Amahane Frolk, who's the third protagonist in this chapter. Security minister for the Gerontocracy of Sorpen, which is...
Yeah, and he seems like a douche.
Very mellifluous language there. He's horrible. But then you've got this dialogue, which is... It struck me that this is exactly the sort of conversation that a communist and a Nazi could have had in some Balkan country in the middle of World War II, where they represent big ideologies and they're trying to win over some local warlord who just cares about whether he can whip his slaves.
True.
Yeah. You know, and the culture, disappointingly, is got the gerontocracy on their side, and they seem absolutely horrible. I mean, you know, I love the description of, you know, the one piece of imagination they've had is taking their prisoners and putting them in these sewer cells and then shitting and pissing till the prisoner dies.
And given they clearly want this changer dead,
yep.
It seems like a very slow way. Like, I would have just, you know, maybe...
Popped him.
Yeah, because, you know, like, there's this reference in there that he's got... They have to remove his teeth or something?
Yeah. Because he's got venomous teeth and venomous claws.
He sounds very dangerous. And, I mean, I guess the other thing that's introduced is that he's being put there because he murdered one of the Outworld ministers by presumably impersonating him, because when he's introduced to the reader, he is an old man. But
his ancient and grubby nakedness.
He's obviously not old. I think he's going to turn hot. And I'm sensing a romance with Belvader. I'm sensing it.
Oh, you think you're calling that? There's going to be romance with Peristic Belvader.
She seems to like him. She doesn't want him dead. Mm-hmm. But I'm a bit curious as to why she's from this all-powerful, you know, I was going to say culture.
Yeah, that's fine.
Called the culture.
Yeah.
But she doesn't seem to be able to stop him from being murdered.
Well, she... needs to keep the gerontocracy of Sorpen on side. She's pretty much the ambassador there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard to know that from 4 pages.
Well, I think that's implied in the text. But, so the gerontocracy of Sorpen is obviously in play in some way, in some bigger conflict.
So he's... right, yeah, so Gerontocracy of Sorpen. I thought that might be his name.
No.
Okay, yeah, right.
So, you know, she's the representative of the culture and they're on the culture's side, but they don't really know why, because they're these horrible provincial planetary hicks with this disgusting gerontocracy of a society. And, I mean, some of the stuff that, you know, in here, like, you know, Amahane Frolk saying, I wanted you tortured first, but Belvader pleaded for you, though God knows why. So, you know, they didn't just want to kill him in the sewer cells, they wanted to torture him, because that's the sort of people they are. Which, again, is funny, because, you know, back in 1987 we thought of America as a place that didn't torture people, and now it's a gerontocracy that does.
That's true.
Yeah. And, I mean, I really... I love the interplay between Belvader and our changer. And they're just starting to lay out the sense of the stakes of what the conflict is about. You know, with, you know, saying, you know, I mean, you know, the change of being like, well, I'm for people and living things, and the culture's got all these computers that aren't alive.
But then Belvader seems to be run by a machine as well, because...
Yeah, but that's the changer's claim, that the culture is representing these monstrous artificial intelligences.
But they seem to like each other on some sort of human level.
Yeah, well, they've got, you know, more respect for each other. Again, a bit like a Nazi and a communist in the Central Europe in 1939. You know, they've got more in common than they do with the local warlord, who's representing a much less sophisticated viewpoint.
And we're also introduced to the Idirans.
Yes.
Who sound freaking cool.
Okay, tell us what you think of the Idirans.
Well, they just sound like big monsters. They're like 3 feet tall. They sound
3
cool.
metres tall, you mean.
3 metres tall. 3 feet, yeah, it's not very exciting. They sound cool.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little confused by one line in here where before Belvader is about to leave the sewer cell.
Yeah.
She says, Bora Horza Gobuchol.
That's
she
his
said
name.
Goodbye.
Yep.
But
then change his name.
No, I thought Horza was the Idirans' name that comes and saves him.
No.
at the last paragraph, the figure was almost 3 metres tall.
Mm-hmm.
Looked vaguely like a small armoured spaceship.
Yep.
Held almost casually in one gigantic hand was a plasma cannon which
Horza, the changer, would have needed both arms just to lift.
Oh, I took Horza as being the Idiran, actually.
No, you can do it in one hand. Almost casually in one gigantic hand.
Oh, so he is named.
He gets named later in the... Yes.
Oh,
it's very late where he gets named. And I think it is significant that he has no name for so long. I think you're actually onto something with that.
Okay. But he's got a name. Okay, so it's Horza. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Obviously read that bit a little too fast.
Yeah. I'd love, there's a little line in here when Balvader is about to leave the conversation they've been having. I mean, he's shackled up and the sewerage is rising around him. And Horza says, just promise me you'll eat and drink very little tonight. I'd like to think there's one person up there on my side and it might as well be my worst enemy. And she just says, I promise. And he's basically meaning, please don't piss and shit on me any more than you have to.
And I like how they say he wanted it to sound like pleading, but it ended up sounding bitter. He wanted it to sound defiant and funny, but it sounded bitter.
Yeah. Yeah. So at least he's self-reflective.
I mean, it's a little unclear whether Balvader is, human, but one thing I did find a little confusing is with Horza, is he is referred to as a man, but clearly he's not.
So I don't think this is too spoily. The culture are human-like.
Yeah, I assume that there was...
And the changelings like Horza, which, Balvader says in this chapter, they're incredibly rare. They're a dying species. But they are human-like as well, except they've got these weird powers to go into trances and change their physical shape, and the poison bits as well.
It's a funny thing about the written word that you have to... I mean, in film, you can very easily show someone looks human-like, but they're not.
Yeah.
But in the written word, you have to...
There's a lot of ambiguity. Yeah. I mean, one thing with these books that Ian M. Banks said was that Star Wars gave him the freedom to write this way. Because all this over-the-top stuff with starships zooming around and things blowing up, and he was looking at it in the movies and thinking, as an author, I can write this stuff for free.
Yeah.
I don't need a special effects budget if I can get my words right, but also just the over-the-top nature of war in space wasn't something that certainly he felt that he could write until Star Wars gave him the license for it. And I mean, to the extent that Star Wars is space opera and these books are definitely space opera, there is a lineage, but I would also say that it's not like Star Wars didn't steal a million concepts from particularly Dune and
Westerns.
And Westerns. Okay, so who is your favourite character in this one, Sheridan?
Oh, well, it has to be Balvader, doesn't it?
Oh, does it?
I've got to go one for the chicks, don't I?
Okay.
I mean, she seems complex. She's cool. Mm-hmm. She's not evil.
Right.
She might become evil, but
you think she's not evil, but she does represent this culture that's all about these synthetic intelligences.
She doesn't seem to want to torture Horza, though.
Yeah, she's still letting him get killed, though.
Well, she doesn't seem to have a little choice, because that knife missile is telling her what to do.
When does the knife missile tell her what to do anything?
Oh, well, Horza says it does.
Horza makes the claim that the knife missile is the real representative of the culture.
True, yeah.
But that's his perspective.
True.
Here we go. With Horza says, Frolk, you're an idiot. Can't you see you're going to be taken over anyway? Probably by the Idirans, but if not, then by the culture. You don't control your own destinies anymore. The war's stopped all that. This whole sector will be part of the front. And then Frolk is saying, well, they're monsters, and he's saying at least they have a god. The culture doesn't. They at least think the same way you do. The culture doesn't. But it's this whole thing about Frolk is representing a backwards aristocracy that is ideologically beneath the conflict. Okay. What do you think's going to happen next, Sheridan?
Well, I think we've got to meet these Idirans. Mm-hmm. They're going to be cool as shit. I'm banking on them. They're going to be my favourite character.
Okay. All right. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes. We might finish up this one, and we will be back soon with Chapter 2.